Here we are.
All right, what's going on, everybody? It's Nate and Brian here, the Warriors of Light podcast, episode number 21.
Yeah.
So, today we're going to be talking about some interesting stuff that's been going on in my life, and uh, has to do with a crazy dream I had the other night. Actually, now, probably like 5 or 6 nights ago now. And we're just going to kind of go from there. So, I guess I'll just jump right into the dream. So, to do a disclaimer, I know you usually dream about things that you watch. That's common, like, oh, you watched a scary movie beforehand or whatever. That evening was not the case. What happened was actually it's very specific, and it had a pretty deep effect on me. So I was at work, I interacted with this person. And for those of you who are more spiritually inclined, you can tell a lot by someone just by looking into their eyes. Brian, I'm sure you can attest to that as well. Um,
Absolutely. You can read a lot.
so something, so basically, I was at work and interacted with an individual, and I could just tell something was wrong in their eyes. Something just told me something's off here. And what's interesting, and this person had a lot going on in their life, and they were just recently recovering from being sick. Um, but anyway, so I leave, I go home, go to sleep that night, and then I have this very profound dream. Didn't watch any scary movies, didn't wasn't even thinking about scary stuff. But this is how the dream went. And I don't remember what order this happened in, but I know it happened either way. So I'm in the dream, and it's this woman who's in a white dress. And all I can remember from this part of the dream is that I wear a cross every day. This exact one, actually. And this is the exact one I was using in my dream. So I was holding this cross out to this young lady's face. And in the dream, I knew it was the person that I had interacted with at work because that's the name that came up. Um, and I was basically trying to like from what I get from it, I was trying to cast a demon out of this girl. It didn't look like the person I interacted with at work, but it was the same person. Like you know how dreams get fumbled like that. So the the girl's eyes were black, and it was crazy because like there was this, like, like she had long dark hair, and the wind, there was like it was almost like we're again in like this castle thing, and she was up against this wall, and I was holding this cross out that I wear, and just saying like the power of Christ compels you, and like trying to basically exorcise a demon out of her is how I interpret it. And um and then at the end of that part, I looked down at my stomach, and I could just feel like this energy trying to basically take over me.
Mm.
I felt it in my arms and my stomach, and it started to like creep up my body. But it was like it was so weird because it felt like it was like almost in my stomach. And then the dream ended. And then I don't know if this happened before or after this part because I had gone back to sleep. It woke me up. That's how it was a powerful dream. It woke me up, and I was like, "What the hell did I just dream?" And then I don't know if this was before or after this part, but at one point I was in like this courtyard, kind of like an old medieval courtyard with like a stone floor, and it was dark, but it looked like there were burn marks on the floor, and all over the floor near like around and on the burn marks were all these rosaries.
Oh, okay.
And that was just like I had to really take that in because I was like, is someone trying to tell me something? So um after that dream, I felt like I was compelled to tell this person, like, hey, because of the things that they were going through, to see if I could try to help them with the issues that they were having. So long story short, myself and my wife prepared a package for her. And when I called her to tell her about it, she cried. So it told me like this person's going through something and they may not even realize that it is on a spiritual nature. Um, but because we all have free will, I don't know if she used it or not. But um, it was kind of weird because when I text her, I text this person and I was like, hey, I need to talk to you, but it's too much to text over. It's too much to text, but it's spiritual in nature. And to my surprise, she wasn't really freaked out by it. It was like
Yeah.
it was like a movie moment. I'm like, hey. So that dream, ever since I've had that dream though, I feel like I've been on a different path with connecting to God and specifically connecting to Jesus and stuff like that. And my life, and since I've started that, my life has been like my energy's been better. My now I kind of I used to think I viewed everything in a spiritual sense, but now it's like enhanced.
Why
Where
do you
it's
feel like that dream enhanced that?
well,
Like,
just like
what do you feel from the dream changed the way you look at everything now?
it basically made me think that like it made it like in a way it made it like you know how we talk about it and we like I felt energies before and stuff like that, but just that whole experience of that dream, it just not to say I didn't believe it before, but it was just like it made it real. Like, oh shit, this is real. So now everything
Yeah.
I approach, like now I don't know, ever since that dream, I feel like I've made a better connection with God and in a way, I don't, and I'm not trying to say it from an ego standpoint or a pride standpoint, but I feel like it was kind of there's multiple messages in there. I think now that I think about that dream, but um, we've talked about you and I have talked about being a chosen one, right? And I was like,
Hmm.
what's the chances of that happening? And then I contact the person, and now I'm like able to tell like, okay, you really do have something attached to you, but what's and then there's a couple parts to this because what's led me to where I'm at now is like my wife does readings. So she did a reading for me and she's like, wow, like all the messages that I got was like, if you want to pursue, because you know how I told you how maybe I'm being called to be an exorcist basically.
Yeah.
But she was like, I don't know, I just need to do this reading for you. It's kind of weird because it's like since I've had that dream too, her stuff is starting to wake up more again because she had stopped doing all that stuff for a while. And then for some reason she's just like, I need to do this. Um and it had basically it was kind of nice because I was when I had that dream, I kind of had that pride, like, oh yeah, I'm chosen, whatever, right? But she
Yeah.
did in a way she kind of talked me my wife in a sense humbled me because like just because of the fact that the end of that dream the whatever it was trying to get me, and I feel like I've been set on a new path in life. So it was almost like when she did the reading it was telling me all the small steps I have to take to be prepared for stuff like that if that's the path I go down. It's like so in the reading it's like you have to work on mediumship, you have to work on your senses and all these other things. And I'm like, huh. And it just led me down this path where I'm like, dude, I started looking into what does it take to become a priest? What does it take to do this? What does it take to do that? But then the part that bothered me is that one, a lot of people still aren't aware of this type of stuff, right? Because we're all sucked up in society and stressed out and whatever, which I can go on a rant about that with what I've been experiencing the last few days. But
Yeah.
But where was I going with that? But so basically, I was just like, holy crap. Like everything I've been, because over the past few months, actually, like I have a rosary. Like a few months ago, probably actually last year now, I did buy a Bible because I don't know, something just, I don't know what happened. I don't remember that last year, but something, I just started to look into it and I was like, I need to research this. And then recently, it's just like everything that I've been doing has been centered around focusing my energy on positivity and like praying to Jesus and giving thanks and being grateful and also understanding to be humble in pursuing this path. Because when I started to research the priest thing and the exorcist thing, they're like, oh, you got to go through years of schooling and blah, 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 blah. And then I started to think, and I want to get your take on this, Brian, because we did kind of talk about this offline. But um, my thing is, if you get a clear, like to me, I see that dream as a message, right? Or like a almost like a calling, right? Because it's not the first dream I've had about demons. It's not. But
Yeah.
that's like that dream was like the most powerful one I've had. And um but I started to think about it and I'm like, so who was the first priest? So in our if you think about, we've talked about churches and all this stuff and how it's been pretty much corrupted. And it's like, how do you reconcile being called by God to do something and versus the process that mankind wants you to follow, right? Because I've had plenty of conversations about this since that dream with my wife, and I'm like, if I do this myself, who's to say, like, one, yeah, if I'm able to help people either by educating them, uh, helping them out, it doesn't necessarily mean I have to be an exorcist, right? There's more than one way
Exactly.
to help. But who's to say that people like, and I know I shouldn't care, but I was just thinking about it and I was like, if I'm able to do all this stuff, I mean, not myself, it's through God, but like, then if that could also in turn make me a threat to the institutions that exist because they're like, oh, now people are going to realize that they don't need like all of our indoctrinated bullcrap, because one of the cards I did get was builder. So I'm supposed to build something. And
Hmm.
I'm like, and then you and I were talking about the coaching and stuff like that. And we had talked about the Ed and Lorraine concept of like helping people. So I don't know. I mean, it's been a wild ride this past week.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I was gonna say is you just mentioned the whole Ed and Lorraine, Warren. You know, I told you Michelle and I watched Conjuring 1 and 2 again recently, um, and like in the second one, or he, I guess both of them, but he's not. I mean, he does do something with the church. I can't remember exactly what his whole like position was with the Catholic Church, I guess. But he wasn't a priest, and he was going in, and he also wore a cross, and he would use that to help ward off things, right? Um, but at the end of the day, like when you and I've talked about like someone like Wayne Dyer, he didn't just go to churches, but he went to churches and talked. He went and talked in different venues and different places, and put on weekend long talks, and he quoted Jesus, he quoted Buddha, he quoted different people. Um, and he was obviously very spiritual. He was supposed to be like one of the greatest spiritual teachers, of our time. But he wasn't, like you said, he wasn't in doctrine with any kind of religious stuff. He wasn't a part of a church. He was basically just speaking from God speaking through him. Like I told you, like when I speak to people or I speak, if I go to do a talk, if I go coach somebody, I always just tell God, speak to me and through me and let everything flow naturally, not from a religious standpoint. And I always tell people, if you want, if you're basing things on religion and you look at things from a religious standpoint, I'm not putting you down. It's not a big deal. Um, but I was raised Catholic, and then at one point was going to a Christian church, and then I just kind of followed my spiritual path as opposed to following any kind of, like we talked about, indoctrination from from a church, right?
Well, that's
And
the
again,
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, no, you're fine. No, I was just saying and so again, I'm not putting like church down. I'm just saying that to me it's like, I feel like as I've grown and I've kind of expanded my horizons and look at all different avenues of my spiritual growth, I've no longer been set to be stuck on one indoctrined way to look at things. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, because when I had looked into that months ago, like when I first started to get, I don't know, like the way I view it, I'm like, when I think about my life, I'm like, okay, God or Jesus has been showing me these signs throughout my entire life, but when I was younger, I was too prideful to understand it or to acknowledge it. Like, dude, and I don't know, I kind of know, but there's been moments where like this was years ago. This random, I'm in a McDonald's eating by myself, but I am in uniform because I was still in the military then. And this random old man comes to talk to me about God, and he's like, "Hey," and he's just like, I'm pretty much not listening because at that time I was practicing basically paganism, where I was like doing spells and I believed in Odin and all that stuff. And I was like, and that stuff was working for me. But now where I'm at now, and I think back on moments like that, and I'm like, there's a joke like if you're a pagan, why don't you do what's the most traditional thing that pagans do and convert to Christianity? And then now I'm thinking about my life, and I'm like, holy shit, like I'm on that path, and I'm not even like actively pursuing it. It's just happening, you know?
Well,
So,
everything ultimately spiritually just happens, right? Like we've talked about many times, like we're all being divinely guided at all times, so everything has a purpose. I have a question for that though, because I honestly I don't know a lot. You and I've talked about it briefly, I think at times, but I don't know a lot about paganism. So you said you were practicing spells. So what
yeah.
what for you was like give me an example of what kind of spell was working for you, just because
Well,
I don't know a whole lot about it.
so here's the thing, and it was kind of like like technically, if you worship Norse gods, it's like called a satru or something like that, right? Or some people call it Odinism or whatever, right? But you know how you and I talk about it's all basically like it's kind of complicated, but it's not because I understand it. But like to explain it to other people, they won't understand it. But it's the same concept that you and I talk about. I was working with my energy, manifesting, like a spell. That's all a spell is you're manifesting, right?
Mm,
So, for example, I was manifesting money and it worked, but I would light sandalwood. I had a green candle. I would do this. It was like a focus. It was kind of like a focused meditation, but on the candle, right? So I
mm,
set an intention with the candle. I lit it, and then there's certain rules, like you're supposed to wait for it to go out by itself. You're not supposed to blow it out. I didn't really follow that portion. I blew it out when I felt like it was time to end it. There were other times where I um, did let it go out by itself, but basically it's a combination of, I was basically praying to Odin or Tyr, who's the god of justice and war. But I basically had like an altar set up, and I had all these crystals, which actually one of the cards my wife pulled for me just now, this reading I was just talking about. She's like, you have crystal abilities to where you have different stones, different crystals, and they have different energies and different attributes that help you with certain things that you're trying to do spiritually and energetically. So, like for example, my main one that I used was obsidian, which helps with grounding. Um, and I would just sit in front of my altar, and I got to the point where I would just shut all the lights off, and I'd lit the candles, and I would just peacefully set my intentions. And then sometimes in the spell, I would inscribe like runes on it, on the candle, because they say that if you have a candle, for example, and you want that specific candle to do a certain thing, it's like, it's almost like the flame of the candle and the color matters. So like you want to inscribe a rune that matches what you're trying to manifest. So like if you want to manifest money, I inscribed into the wax like the rune for, the way I did it was I inscribed Odin's rune on it and then Tyr's, because I felt like I related more to Tyr than Odin, because Tyr is not a chief deity. He's not the main one in that belief system or spiritual system, whatever you want to call it. So I would inscribe a rune, and then I would light the candle, manifest, and I say it's manifesting because I was also visualizing like money coming to me for this specific scenario. But at the same time, when I was doing that, I've always, like when I say, you cleanse your house, like I burn sandalwood a lot. Sometimes I use sage, but you have to be careful with sage because, and Native Americans use sage. So that's the thing for me. I'm like people who have been programmed a certain way are going to take this and be like, oh, it's your witchcraft, it's demons, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, it's all the same concept, but now the difference for me is when I was doing that stuff, it was more about what can I do for me? And now I feel like since I have been going through this transition, like, and it also showed up in the reading, and some people even think readings are demons, which whatever. But in the reading, it said that man, I just forgot. But basically, now I'm looking at it to how I can serve instead of
Yeah.
doing like instead of doing like a manifestation for money for myself. Now I'm like daily talking to God about, surrendering, like letting go of my ego, my pride, and also like how can I serve to help people in that way. So like the transition from that to this has been years in the making, literally.
Yeah.
Because when I started doing that stuff, that was like 2015, 2014, something like that. And then just recently, this past year or so, is when slowly yet surely the whole, like basically now I feel like I have more of a relationship with Jesus than I ever thought I would. And it's not even like, it's not like I sought it out. It's like it's just happening. So I don't
So
know.
when you say you have more relationship with Jesus, do you feel, which I know you say it's not really, I mean, you say it's not really in a religious sense, because again, what I've learned, obviously, which I see things differently now, but oftentimes like in whether it be in the Christian church or whatever the case is, it's Jesus is like your intercessor in between you and God, and like Jesus was the only Son of God, but like you and I've talked about, is I believe we're all a extension of God, right? And Jesus was a great spiritual teacher in my eyes, and was teaching amazing things, teaching us about the power of our mind, teaching us how we can create, we can manifest, we can heal, we can do all these things. But if you talk to people that have a different set of belief systems, they're going to tell you like that's ridiculous. It's only Jesus. You don't have any power. But that's not the
Mhm.
way I see it. So what
I
are your,
believe
and that's just me personally, but
so. I believe we all have. So if you, this is the problem with different interpretations of the Bible, of different sects of Christianity, or even other religions. Because like in Islam, their problem is that they believe Jesus was real and that he was a prophet, but he wasn't God, right? But, and I'm not the most up to date on all this stuff. I just go off of what resonates with me. And I recently found that, like even from growing up, I told you like my grandfather and my dad would question like, why do I have to go to a church to worship God if you created
yeah,
everything? And
exactly.
I'm leading up to the Jesus my Jesus belief, or sort of knowing, I guess. That's just how it feels. Um, because you have those certain spiritual inclinations of like, I know, I don't know. But like,
Mhm.
if you think about a creator who's created this, who's created us, yes, I believe that we all individually have power. But I think that just like with money, it can be used for good, it could be used for bad. So I think that it depends, like we've talked about, Jesus judges, or the God judges you on the intent of your heart, right? And I just saw this in like some in a video the other day, and it made a lot of sense to me. And I think it's also like somewhere in the Bible, but don't quote me on it. But there's what I think is that, because yes, what you said is they say you can't have a relationship with God unless it's through the Son, right? You
Mhm.
can't go to the Father unless you go to the Son first.
Mhm.
But here's what I think. I think that Jesus could have been, or was, God coming to earth in human form. Because that's a theory too. Because if you have a creation, and at the time he came, if you have a creation that you've made and you love them so much, and God, we all have free will, so God will allow things to happen for us to learn, right? But I kind of buy in more to like, okay, if I was a creator, how would I, because certain messages, like, we can't receive if we're not ready to receive them, we're not going to, right? So if I was like this all-powerful being, how would I go, and if what better way could I get my message across to where they'll understand it? So who's
Wait,
to say that he may not have come to earth in human form, and he said he was the Son of God, so he could make people understand, like, because they say if you see God, like, you can't handle it, right? I don't know if you've ever heard that,
I
but
have, but
it does sound complicated, but I don't know.
no, I get what you're saying because that's I've heard other people, obviously explain it that way. But so what I've come to learn and understand from my understanding is, we are all powerful creators. So we are all an extension of God. So we're all here, basically God in human form, right? We're all consciousness. We're all here in spirit, like we're spiritual beings having a human experience.
Well,
So
right. They
we are
say that
here,
we're
and
made
we're
in his image.
yeah. So we're all powerful. We're all creators. It's just I believe like when Jesus was here and he was teaching and he was speaking and he was healing and doing things, when he spoke something out, he just spoke it with such faith and confidence that it's done, like that's already done. So like what I've been like taught and learned about like manifesting and is when I'm speaking something out or when I script or journal something, I do it with like unwavering faith, knowing that it's already done. Even though I may not see it like physically in the moment, it's already on its way to me. It's already a done deal, right? In whatever way that happens, it's not up to us how it happens because the human mind always wants to have this pretty little picture of how everything's going to come to play. When at the end of the day, God's like, I have a whole different way that those, I guess, dreams and aspirations you have are going to come to fruition, right? And obviously, too, we will get what we need, not always what we want when we want it. When we're ready, we'll receive these great things that we put out there. But at the end of the day, we're going to get what we need when we need it, right? Um, and so, yeah, I guess it's just like a little bit different perspective of like, like I said, how religion speaks of Jesus and how like I feel and what I feel he was here teaching and showing us, you know.
Yeah. So I really like, it's not like, it's not like if someone comes to me and says, "Oh, Jesus wasn't God," I'm like, "Okay, cool. Like, that's your thing." Like, I'm not going to judge anybody, because that's what I told you the either yesterday or the other day. It's like, you mentioned Wayne Dyer. A lot of what Wayne Dyer taught, a lot of it aligns with also what Jesus taught.
Yeah.
So, like, because Wayne Dyer talks about him, he talks about the Tao. It's like, who's to say, if you have this all powerful creator, how do you know that he didn't every couple thousand or a couple hundred years just come to Earth and be like, "Hey, I'm gonna remind these people, like, hey, we got to be nice to each other and love each other." And it's either they were God in human form, or he sent them here to teach them.
See,
You know?
I tend to be more aligned with like that we're all sent here as teachers, like for different things, right? We all have gifts and these spiritual gifts and powers and things that we can align with and that we can use. And I do believe we all come with those purposes of what we're supposed to learn and what we're supposed to do to help, I guess, humanity or the planet or all of it, all the above. Um, as opposed to, maybe just one person coming. I think all of us come, right? So like even Wayne Dyer, as he
Mhm.
like went through his journey, he went through all the, like he said, he had a tough journey. He went through multiple different things, whether it was addictions, divorces, like all these different things, like the human experiences, right? But at the end of the day, he got to an older like period of his life where he was much more awakened and enlightened and was able to come, and he knew that his purpose was to speak and help people to broaden their horizons, open their minds, open their hearts, and the fact that we are very powerful. So like he always taught about our thoughts. And so that's why I always talk to you and other people about like where we put our thoughts is what we get, right? What we're giving energy to is what we're going to receive.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
truly believe, like when I now interpret what Jesus was saying, I feel like that's what he was telling us. Like where you're putting your thoughts. He taught about meditation. From my understanding now, from other people I've learned from, that he went to India, learned a lot about meditation. Maybe in that time where he was not in the, like being spoken of in the Bible, that he was actually, learning, growing, and expanding. And that's what he was trying to teach people is like watch where you put your thoughts, be mindful, focus on the good, use your powers for good, those types of things, right?
Well, yeah, that's what I'll say is like no matter what anybody believes or like I'm not gonna judge anybody. Like, but basically I agree with you because I just know that for me, since I've started or since I've had that really since I had that dream, it was almost like in a way I also look at it as like it's kind of like a wake up call, like, hey, this is what you're here for, in a way. Not just
Yeah.
not like the pride thing, like, oh, I'm gonna go be an exorcist like in the movies, you know? Because that's initially
Yeah.
honestly that's what I was thinking. And then my wife did that reading and it humbled me, and I was like, okay, roger that. But like, um, I just know that for me, since I've been practicing just praying to God, to Jesus, to the angels, and I still and another thing that opened up for me that that's what I meant to mention earlier is that my wife was like, they're telling you you need to connect to your spirit guide also. And if you're a super religious person, you're just going to be like, oh, that's negative, that's a demon, blah blah blah. But then I started to do it, and I was like, okay. Now I feel like it's just changed my energy because I've been working on it so much more for the positive.
Hmm.
And it's like now I'm able, like, how we talk about how we've had conversations where I'm basically like channeling. Now the message was you need to work on your gifts so that you can do what you're sent here for, which is helping
Yeah.
people, getting rid of negativity, helping people in their lives, whatever it is. Like basically the fight of good versus evil, which is what we're all here for. And then um I just feel like I've been, like I said earlier, it's almost like it's accelerated in that now I'm able to be, I guess the best way to put it is like more enlightened, because I had such a powerful dream of evil, which is not the first dream I've had with something like that. It's happened my
Hmm.
whole life. And then now it's just in what I'm practicing because I'm still, like I told you, like when you called me the other day, I still meditate,
Of course.
right? I meditated like all weekend. It was great. I was in such a serene place. I was like, oh my God. Like it's just like it's like it's catapulted me personally to where it's like, okay, I've received these messages, but my wife has gifts too. And some people would say that it's evil, but it's like she's like I've told you before, she would basically do what people would call witchcraft, which I think that was also a disservice, like the witch hunt and everything, because you have these people with gifts, but because you're afraid of it or because it's not within your control, then you want to get rid of it, right? So she was like, when she was doing the reading for me, she's like, your spirit guide's right next to you. And I'm like,
Mm.
what? And I'm like, I couldn't, and I thought I was good, right? I thought I was like, oh, I got energy, blah, blah. I couldn't pick up on it at all. She's like, he's right next to you. And she's like, I know it's a he because it has masculine energy. I just can't see what he looks like.
Yeah.
But during the reading, I kept asking, like, how do I do this? How? And she was like, your spirit guide's just shaking his head. Like, basically, what the message was from that was to open up and at the same time have humility so that you can actually learn the different abilities that you have or that you can learn so that you can serve your purpose here on earth. So it's like,
I think
you know,
I think that all comes down to surrender, right? I mean, like it's like if you're coming from any place of ego, you're not going to be able to connect to your guide, right?
oh, I know.
Because your guides, angels are not going to connect to you if you're coming from a place of ego. And how can you benefit? But when you switch to how can I serve and you surrender to what you're being led to do, I believe you won't miss the signs. They'll be obvious. You'll hear them, you'll feel them, and then you'll be able to use them to benefit others. It's kind of like you said, you went from like basically doing this, doing the spells to benefit you to how can I serve? And like ultimately that's why we're all here, right? Where there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with receiving, these beautiful things, in material form, like as we're going through this life and going and helping people and doing those things, it's wonderful thing. But I think that, most of the time we're taught and we're conditioned to believe we come from this place of like, it's all what am I going to get from me giving this service, as opposed to how can I serve and let the universe take care of the rest.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And another thing I forgot to mention is that I was talking and about the dream with my wife because I was basically kind of seeking her guidance too, because that's something I do a lot because she does have these gifts and she's more like they basically in the reading they want me to work on being a medium where I can actually see spirits and like connect with them because that's something I told you the other day like I'm kind of fearful of, but now I'm starting to open up to it more. So I seek her guidance on a lot of that stuff. And I told her I was like I wouldn't be where I'm at like spiritually if I had never met you, right? And that's true. But um basically like what when I was talking to her about my dream, she was like, "Holy crap, that could have also been a past life." And you were getting this message of this person that you interacted with, and the way that spirit knew how to deliver that message was to make it familiar to you by showing you something from a past life. Like when I told her about um, just the whole dream in general, but specifically when I saw the rosaries on the floor of that castle, she was like, "You could have been," because I have gotten readings where it's like you were I always get priest, teacher, shaman, whatever, right? So to me, it all encompasses the same thing. It's like, okay, your soul has come back here for this reason. You've lived these different lives where you were doing these things, teaching people, and then when she said it could have been a past life that you were remembering, and then that's how they were sending that message to you, so you understand it. That was powerful for me too, because I was like, oh, it sounds like I'm all over the place, but it all makes sense to me. I don't.
Well, yeah, you're not always going to be able to explain to others like how the things are piecing together, right? I
Yeah,
mean, I mean, I understand it. It makes sense to me, but not others might not understand what you're saying or where you're coming from, but that's okay. Not everybody's going to understand, but when they see you as you continue to evolve and you start using what you're here for, people are going to start picking up on it and being like, "Oh, that is what he's here for," right? And
hmm,
at the end of the day, we're still like, I believe that we're given these gifts and these messages to share with others, but it doesn't mean that everyone is going to connect to what we're saying.
right.
You know what I mean? So, which is okay.
Yeah, no, I agree. I know not everybody's gonna pick it up because not everybody's aware of what you and I are aware of. You know, so
Exactly.
like
Exactly.
I could talk to somebody and be like, "You're fucking crazy," right? Like people who are watching
Absolutely.
this, they're probably gonna be like, "This guy's crazy." Like that's it. But like when like you said, you watched The Conjuring, and then my wife and I watched The Deliverance yesterday, and it's like when it made me think of the dream again, and I had a better understanding of, okay, this is how, not because of the movie, but I was watching the movie and I was like just thinking about all this stuff. And the way I worded it to the person that I was trying to help was, hey, when she started crying, she's like, thank you so much. I've had so much going on in my life. And I was like, yeah, I know why. Because you have all this negativity and you just need to get rid of it. That's exactly what I said to her. I didn't tell her what happened in the dream because I knew, because like you and I have talked about, some people have a strong will and some people don't. So I knew that if I told her the dream specifically, it would have made it worse. Because then she'd
Oh
be
yeah.
thinking, "Oh, I have a demon." How, and then she'd be more fearful, yada yada. So I was just like, "Hey," and I told her like, "I know why you're going through this stuff. You just have a lot of negativity. So I gave you that stuff so you could help ease and get rid of that, so that you can clear the energy that's there within yourself and your home, and move on and do better, right?" But it was interesting because that was last week when I gave this person the stuff. And we gave them, like I said earlier, we gave them bracelets. And I was basically like, first of all, it took a couple days for that person to come pick up the stuff, which led me to believe that she does actually have something negative attached to her. Because what this has done is it's made me pay attention to the little details.
Hmm.
What I mean by that is, like, let's say you're having a conversation with someone. Let's say they're having a spiritual warfare, right? But they don't. Because I was talking to this person and I was explaining what they needed to do with like the stuff to clear the house. And what was kind of creepy about it, but I understand it, is like, my house isn't ready. That's what they said. My house isn't ready. And it's like, if you're not in tune with this stuff, it's not going to matter to you. You're just going to do it. Right. But the fact that this person said my house isn't ready made me believe that, like, okay, this thing has a pretty strong attachment to her, like has a hold on her, you know? So I'm like, so like little details like that, like if someone said that, if you were just having a conversation and you're like, oh, I'm not ready, you'd be like, okay, well, when you're ready, then whatever. If it's a different type of scenario, like, oh, you're ready to buy a car or something, I don't know. But now I pay attention. Like, what this has done for me is it makes me pay attention to the little details of what people do and say to kind of um read what's going on in their life. I don't know. It's hard to
Uh,
explain.
another another way to look at it too, though, is when you take somebody a message, like especially something deep like that, a spiritual message. If the person's not ready to receive that message, they're not going to hear it anyway, or they're going to perceive it in a completely different light. You know what I mean? It's kind of that whole saying that Wayne Dyer used to say: "When the student's ready, the teacher will appear." Right? And
Yeah.
so it's like, I just feel like there's a lot of people, like you can take a message to them, and they're going to give you a weird look, or they're going to be very resistant to it. Not It could be one because there is that spiritual warfare aspect going on, but they don't understand that. You know what I
Right.
mean? Maybe something subconsciously speaking that to them, but they really don't know what's going on. They just know that they have this heavy energy and they're not ready to do it. I mean, I think about like me learning and growing. So from like Wayne Dyer having been one of my greatest probably teachers, um, I read one of his books in 2009. I wasn't brought back to his work until the end of 2016. So that was a pretty big gap of me not being ready to learn these things. You know what I'm saying? To go deeper spiritually, to give life, like to look at life differently, to understand there is like all the spiritual stuff actually happening outside of what I was taught in religion, but actually like on a deeper level of me looking at life now, I wasn't ready. So that's why sometimes we take these things that we might see and we might hear and perceive and be like, oh my gosh, this person's going through X, Y, and Z, and we see it. If they're not ready to hear it, it's not going to matter until
Yeah.
at some point when it comes back to them, it could be a month, a year, whatever, right? But they'll look back on what we told them or somebody told them, in that deeper spiritual sense and be like, holy shit, that's what they were telling me.
Well, yeah, that's exactly what I was telling you about when I was talking about all the things that happened throughout my life. Now I'm like, oh shit.
Hmm.
Same thing. When I was younger, even before the paganism thing, I wasn't ready to receive all these messages that I was getting. And it's like God was like knocking on my door, but I wasn't opening it. I was just like, whatever, dude. And then now, where I'm at now, it's like finally you're ready to receive these things so that you can do what you're supposed to do. Like we talked about the podcast, like educating people about this and trying to help other people. Because at the end of the day, like you just said, if people aren't ready to receive it, they're not going to. So
Yeah,
and I've experienced that. I've been in a point in my life where I'm not ready to receive something, and then sometimes something will happen years later where you're like, okay, I'm paying attention now. I'm listening.
absolutely. Well, that's the same thing for me now, is right. Like I can look back on all my experiences, and before when I complained about experiences or be like, "Why is this shit happening to me?" Now I look back and I'm like, that's why all those things had to happen. That's why I had to experience everything I did was to get to where I'm at today, right? But while we're going through it, that human monkey mind's like, "Oh man, poor me. I'm a victim." Man, you're not a victim. You're just learning and growing, and you're being refined to get to the place where you're supposed to be and continue to grow to be a better service to the rest of humanity with whatever your gifts are, right? So everything we experience is getting us in alignment so that we can use our gifts to go serve other people, right? At the end of the day. So that's why you and I can see somebody and I can have a conversation with somebody that's experiencing whatever it is, and I'm like, oh, I know exactly what you're going through because I experienced that in my past,
Yeah.
right? So it's always working in our favor. Life always is. We just happen to miss that because for a long time we're so self-centered and so focused on ourselves.
Well, it's funny you say that because you and I talk about like the concept of money all the time. And I just had that conversation with my wife the other day. It was like, I'm so sick of, like, honestly, like, I feel like my spirit is just tired of how our society is structured, because we're just like,
Oh yeah.
it's like, dude, we're just, our whole system. The reason why a lot of people aren't in tune with this stuff is because to a certain degree, everyone is programmed and suppressed from all
Yeah,
of this stuff.
very much so. Very much so.
So that's where my gratitude comes in because I'm like I'm so grateful that I've been able to even be led on this journey and be like, all right, thank you for basically waking me up because I thought I was awake, and now since this recent experience, I'm like, okay, this is like a different ball game now, you know,
Yeah,
and that's
for
what
sure.
exactly what you said is growth. I feel like it's been like a growth journey for me, specifically in this case.
Well,
So
absolutely. All of these things are growth and everything is speaking to you. And because you're becoming more receptive, you're being spoken to in these dreams that are going deeper now for you, right? But yeah, I mean, like, it's like you said. I mean, people are suppressed. Why do they not want us to know that we have this power and that we can create, we can heal, we can do so many wonderful things? Because it's been suppressed by the Catholic Church, by multiple, different avenues of people trying to like hold down the knowledge, hold down the wisdom that's out there, because there's that select few that still want selfish control, right?
exactly.
But I believe that's why so many of us are waking up now or within the last several years is to get that message out there so that more and more of the world does wake up to why we're really here. And then again, like I've said before, I feel inside of me, and I've heard multiple people say it on other podcasts, is that we're coming to a place of like we're all going to be living a much better life in a better way for everyone, not just for a select few, but for everyone, for the ones that are truly here ready to wake up. I mean, we're all here on a spiritual journey, but some people are going to hold to really tightly to what they've known because that's where they feel quote unquote comfortable, but it's a false sense of comfort, and you got to allow yourself to step into the unknown and keep growing, and all of a sudden you wake up one day and like, wow, look where we're at now, you know.
Well, what's interesting is I was talking about the Deliverance movie, and in the movie,
Mm,
it's based on a true story. Like the family is poor, like the mom is struggling to keep the kids, like it's a crazy mess, right? So there's a lot of negativity. And then I was talking with my wife, and I was like, "Wow, now I get it." because she's always talked about wanting to make a lot of money so she can help a lot of people, where I just wanted to make a lot of money so we could be comfortable, and then like,
Hmm.
you know, the American dream, right? And now like now I'm like, there's a reality to that. Like people who are suffering in the material world inherently are, if they're not attuned, they're not going to be attuned to what we're talking about right now. So they're going to attract more negativity on the spiritual sense as well. So it was
Yep.
kind of like, it dawned on me. I was like, wow, like how messed up is our society? Like now I just want to make a lot of money. So like imagine if you could give that person who maybe they do have a demon in their freaking house, right? But because they're going through financial stress, family stress, past traumas, they're struggling to survive. That's what was happening in that movie, and a lot of people are struggling right now, right? So it made me realize, I was like, oh, now I understand, like if you have a lot of money, just help people. Like if you can take off the stressors and the things that are suppressing them, then maybe it will help ease them to change spiritually as well, you know?
Of course, it allows for more focus on deeper purpose, right? On deeper purposes in this life. If you have more financial abundance, so like if your heart is like, okay, I want more financial abundance, so then in turn I can go out and create this company that's going to go out and serve millions of people, right? That's where I believe our focuses should be. And there's nothing wrong with the fact, like you said, you would focus on it for more comfort for your family. There's nothing wrong with having financial abundance so that your family is doing well. But then you now have that so that you can give more energy and time to your greater purposes, which could be creating a multi-million-dollar company that is out there to help millions upon millions of people, right? Like, I mean, we've talked about it, and I say like one of my biggest visions is having a transformational coaching company and speaking and helping people, through retreats and different things, helping people heal, expand, and grow, so that I see less and less suffering. I don't like seeing human suffering. I can't stand it. So never have since I was little. I couldn't stand it. So if I can use the gifts I've been given to go help that on a larger scale, and in turn, so that means if I'm given more and more financial freedom to go do that, that's going to be a wonderful thing, right? But we
But
are so blinded by what we're taught, especially in this country and in other countries as well. But we're taught that go get that money so you can go buy more shit that you don't need.
yeah,
And a lot of people are still stuck on that. Unfortunately, they're still in materialism, which is not what we're here for.
well,
Nothing wrong with buying a material thing that you like once in a while, but that's not what we're ultimately here for.
oh yeah, I 100%, because now that you just said that, it makes me think, like maybe that's the lesson. Like when you talk about like wealthy people are unhappy all the time, right? It's like now that I'm thinking about this concept, I'm like, maybe this growth in messages, we're meant to learn these things before we have the material wealth, so that when we get the material wealth, we'll use it for good and not like shitty programmed suppressive reasons.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. That's the whole thing is learning, you're putting out to the universe. I mean, like I tell you, I do through meditation, through visualization, prayer, writing, whatever. Like, hey, I desire these things, but it's truly to go help more and more to also give my family, the life I believe that I want my family to have. Um, and so there's, like I said, yeah, like you just said, actually, rather, is that, you learn these things so that when you are given those gifts, you don't squander them on stupid shit. That's like you and I've talked about, and I always say it. I'm like, when I ask for the things I ask for, or like my relationship that I have now, it's like, it's like when I wasn't ready for it, I didn't want it
Yeah.
because I would have gone and fucked that up. And it's like, yep, you don't want to do that. You know what I mean? So it's just like anything else, whether it's monetary or whatever, your vision, you don't want to get it when you're not ready for it because then you're going to end up blowing it anyway. And then you
Mhm.
look back and you're like, damn it, I had such a great thing and I blew that. Right. So that goes, I feel like that goes for every aspect of our life. That's why I always say, bless me with these things and greater, but when I'm ready. So,
Yeah. Then I always think back to, like, even last week, like I still listen to Wayne Dyer,
Of
So
course,
like
me too, all the time.
one thing that stuck out to me, and I've heard it before, but it stuck out to me more last week, but even before the stream, before any of this. It's like focus. He says focus on what you want, not what you don't want. He says
Yeah,
if you focus on what you think you want, but it's like detrimental to you, you don't want it. Like if it causes you misery, you don't want it. So I feel like that was kind of like the kickstart to all of this happening, because then I was like, okay. And I was like, God, I just want to serve people. I want to do what I was put here for. Show me. I asked, like, show me. And then a couple days later, I interact with this person. I have that dream, and I'm like, holy shit. Like,
absolutely.
okay. You know?
Yeah.
So,
It's like we've talked about that before. Surrender, right? Again, surrender. And once you start asking for those types of things, like God, show me why I'm here. I'm open to fully using my gifts. Like, use me. The minute you like surrender your heart to it, yeah, things will start happening. Sometimes very quickly. So it's just that true surrender daily and being open to what it is you're truly here for, and being willing to step forward with faith and just go do it. So
and another thing too is I've been seeing a lot more synchronicities. And actually, what was very interesting is that Christianity also talks about this concept, but you and I talk about this all the time. And we've talked about it in episodes before. And I just thought the synchronicity of it was like, oh, it's like I already knew it, but it's like just reinforcing it. And then it happened in my own home recently where, my daughter was having an issue and I helped her through it. And then my wife was like, holy crap, like you really are, like, she's like, you really are becoming like a better person. Like I'm not irritated, I'm not mad, I'm not whatever, or like if my kids are acting up, I used to get upset, yell, all this other stuff, and now I'm like, hey, like what's going on? How can I help you? Instead of like approaching it from an aggressive standpoint. But the concept that I wanted to tell you, and you already know this, but um in this, it was like a Christian based video, but it's the same exact thing that you and I talk about. And it said if you want to fight evil, first you have to fight the evil that's within yourself.
yeah,
And then I thought about the conversations that you and I have had where it's like, and then I just went on this, it was like it was almost like a revelation or something where it's like, holy shit, of course. Because, and I told my wife when my daughter was going through that moment of despair, and I kind of helped her, me and my wife kind of helped her through it. And um, I just told my wife, I was like, you can't heal anybody unless you heal yourself, and you can't heal the world unless you heal your home.
yeah,
You know what I mean? So I was like, I don't know, it's just profound. And then I thought about you and I, we talk about that all the time. And it was just like, it was more of a reminder, but more of like solidifying that, like, yeah, work on yourself. Cause I still have fear and doubt and despair sometimes, but now I'm able to work through it better. And in turn, it makes me better for my family. And then in turn, it bleeds out into my family because it's the energy, right? And then in turn, that will bleed out into the world, you know?
absolutely. Yeah, that's
So,
why, I always say that the deepest work we can do is on ourselves, right? Like you said, we want to go change the world. Guess what? Change yourself and you'll change the world. So work on yourself. Become a better version of you. Doesn't mean you got to be perfect. Doesn't mean, because we're always going to be a work in progress. But and then like you said, we still have these emotions. I mean, it's like, still have fear sometimes, still have worry sometimes, still have these things. But it's like, how long do you sit in it? I feel like the more I've grown, I sit in those emotions a lot shorter periods, right? Like like I'll feel that something happens, whatever the case, I experience something, like I feel it for a short period, and I'm able to pull myself right back to my alignment, to my peace. Because so it doesn't mean, like, no matter how much work we do, it doesn't mean that we're going to come to a place, maybe, but it doesn't mean you're going to come to a place where we never feel those things, because we're still spiritual beings having a human experience. So the human aspect of us is still going to feel those things. But how much shorter can you make that time frame of you feeling those things that aren't in alignment with what God, which is love, right? It's just love. You're in a straight, like, state of peace all the time. Um, But yeah, I do believe like the biggest thing we can do is the work on ourselves. And then like you said, that's gonna like radiate out to everything and everyone around you. Right?
Yeah, exactly. It's energy, right?
Yeah. It's just the energy you're giving off.
It's the same thing you and I talk about all the time. And then what I was telling you about, when I was looking into like being an exorcist and all this stuff, when I was looking at it like from a pride standpoint or ego, I realized I was like, okay, I need to not look at it from that standpoint because that's not going to help anything. So it was kind of interesting because a part of the growth that this has resulted in is like now I'm grateful for the humility it's given me because I'm like, okay, now I look at it more of I'm a student.
Oh
Whereas
yeah.
whereas before I was like, I know, like you and I talk about this stuff and I'm like, yeah, I know. But now I approach it like I'm still learning. Like I'm a
We're
student.
all always still
Yeah.
learning. Yeah.
But it's a beautiful
That's the
place
thing
to
is
be
always be
when you look at it from that concept of I'm a student, but I'm
absolutely
I don't know, just saying that it just makes me more humble, you know?
100%. And we're always learning, right? And I mean, if you're willing to, we're always all in a state of learning. And if we're willing to understand that everyone and everything is a teacher to us, because it could be a child that teaches us a lesson that we didn't see, right? But we because we've gained years, quote unquote years through our human timeline and wisdom and things, we think like, oh, okay, like this younger person can't teach me something. No, they can. We can learn from many different places, people, and things, but we just have to be open to that and humble, like you said, humble enough to be willing to learn from everything that's around us.
Yeah. So it's a lot of perspective. Gained a lot of
Yeah,
perspective
absolutely.
last week.
That's good. Sounds like you had a great week, even though it may have been may have been a
Well,
little heavy, but it's a great. It may have been a little heavy, but it's a great week though.
well,
Ultimately,
that's another important message I think we should talk about is because we were just talking about this. I can't remember if we talked about it today or yesterday. I think it was yesterday. But it's like everybody, they think that these spiritual awakenings are some beautiful, always peaceful, whatever's, and it's like no, it's going to make you uncomfortable.
oh,
Right?
extremely.
Like we talk about that, like you can't grow if you're always comfortable. So
Yeah, no, and that's
throughout this process, the last week, I've been pretty damn uncomfortable. I'm
yeah,
not gonna
100%.
lie, you know.
That's what I always say too, and I think you and I were talking about it earlier. But yeah, that's what I always say too. Is like, yeah, this whole like quote unquote spiritual awakening process has not been a lot of fun. I mean, like there's been periods where it's like you love having these epiphanies and you see things more clearly, but like going through the learning, looking at your own shit and being like, oh my gosh, like what am I doing? And then the healing you got to do is oftentimes no fun at all. But we
Like,
have to go through it to get to that place. So
yeah, the best way I can describe it, like even though I got these powerful messages, even though I was like, oh great, I'm like growing. At the same time, I was also still somewhat going through my own despair. Like I was like feeling heavy at times because of like work stuff and all this other stuff. Like that's like I said, like stuff will suppress you. And you talked sense into me the other day, and you're like, hey, it's all divine plan, So
yeah.
like I realized like when you said the spiritual awakening is not like you're just sitting in a field and there's unicorns and butterflies flying around and you're just like, oh,
Yeah,
this is
not
great.
at all.
It's a
Not at
lot
all.
of unearthing of some stuff, and like you have to get through. It's like shadow work. You have to get through that despair, and or even how even not even if you have despair, but not necessarily just like get rid of it, but how you work through it,
Hmm.
right? Because a lot of people, and I guess this is a good message to put out, is a lot of people get caught up in circumstantial things. Like you talk about that a lot, and it's like, oh, my car broke down. Oh, my life's so miserable because I couldn't. My electric bill is higher this month or whatever. We're all based like we're like you said earlier. We're all focused on the monkey mind survival. So if one little thing goes wrong, we're like, oh, my life is ruined. But it's like if you stop focusing on circumstantial things, the only thing you can control is your own energy.
Hmm.
right? And how you react to things. So if you're like reacting with negativity and you're like, oh, my life sucks because I got a flat tire, you're constantly putting, we talked about this before. And like I said earlier, like Wayne Dyer said, focus on what you want, not what you don't want. So
Absolutely.
if you're projecting all of that negativity, you have to grow through that. And that's another thing I've kind of learned over the last few days. I'm like, okay, I have a lot of stress, but how much of it is circumstantial and how much of it is my own inner despair that I'm allowing to manifest, you know?
Well, it comes down to just not living in a primal state, right? Survival, fight or flight. I mean, we're not supposed to be in that state all the time. So really just looking at life, the way I try to remind myself is looking at life that everything's always working for my highest good, even when it doesn't seem like it in the moment. And so always bringing myself back to a state of like, what do I want to see in my life, right? And if I can focus more of my energy and time and thoughts on what I actually want to see, then I'm not, like you said, I'm not looking at the circumstantial current situation. Because the current
Yeah.
situation may not be where you want it, but if you're giving energy to what you actually want, eventually that stuff's going to be showing up on a regular basis. So I try not to give too much time or energy to the shit that I don't want. You know what I'm saying? And that does take practice. People always say, well, well, that's hard. And it's like it's not so much that it's hard, it's just it takes practice. Yes, it's not super easy to get to that point, but if you do it consistently over time, it's just like doing a rep in the gym. You're going to see a change. You're going to feel a change, right? Same thing for your mind. Same thing for your thoughts. Rewiring your mind. It takes time. It takes practice. It takes at night putting on affirmations or whatever it is you need to do. So your subconscious mind will start to rewire as well. You get to that place of like, oh, this is just natural for me to be in a positive state. This is natural for me to look at the good, right? This is
Mhm.
natural for me not to react or respond to a person, a situation, a thing. You start to come to a place of just this is always very natural for me just to be in this happy place, right?
That that's exactly that's another kind of reminder I got too. Is like when I was talking about work stuff, I've had a lot of realizations the last few days. And I've just been sitting, praying, meditating, and I'm like, oh, and like these messages will come to me. I'll be thinking about something, and I'll be like, I understand. Like now, like I said earlier, like now I see it as me being like a humble student, but now I have more understanding. So like, for example, with work, I'm like, oh, I'm still here because I still have lessons I need to learn. Like I had like an epiphany the other day. I'm like, oh, I'm still here because I'm on the right track. All the signs and messages I'm getting is like you're on the right path, but you still have some stuff to work through.
Hmm.
But we've talked about this before where people, if like we talk about circumstantial things, it's like if you view it from a place of dread, you're going to have dread. But if you can pull yourself back and view it from what, like you say it all the time too, is like, what lesson am I supposed to be learning from this?
Hmm.
Take it as a teaching moment, as a learning moment, and it will shift your whole energy and perspective from negative to positive because you're actually paying attention and getting more understanding.
Yes, because everything is trying to help us, right? We live in a friendly universe if you look at it that way, and it's always trying to help us grow. The other thing I was going to say about that is just a little thing that I remind myself of. What we resist will always persist, right? So if we're trying to resist, so like if you want this work situation for you to pass, lean into it with an open heart and see what it is. Like you said, you're supposed to be learning from it. Don't give energy to it. Just be open. Okay, I'm supposed to be learning what from this. Okay, great. And then when it's supposed to exit your like exit left off the stage of your play, it's gonna go. You know what I'm saying? It'll only be there for the time it's supposed to. But if we're constantly resisting these things and putting that energy out, it's like you're trying to just call it back, right?
Yeah.
Just like when we chase things, whatever we chase is gonna run. Let things
Yeah.
flow naturally.
That,
Things will come to you.
but that's why I'm grateful for you too, because you helped me put some perspective on that stuff. I was like, dang, thanks, Brian.
God just speaks through me to you, buddy. That's it, man. Like I said, I tell God every day, speak to me and through me for others, and I'll be more than happy to relay whatever message I'm supposed to.
But think about how many people need to hear this, man. Like
Yeah.
how many people are suffering right now, and they're just stuck in that monkey bubble, and they're like, how am I going to buy milk today? Which
Yeah.
understandably so, rightfully so, because life is not easy, but it can be.
It can be.
It just depends on the amount of work, not just mentally, not just physically, but spiritually, you're supposed to put in.
Yes, exactly. Every aspect, mind, body, and soul.
And
So,
another interesting aspect. Oh, sorry, what were you gonna say?
no, no, go for it. I'll say it after.
So you know how you and I we've talked about before. This was crazy too. So I'm going back to when we were watching the Deliverance, right? So at one point in the movie, all this stuff is happening. The evil spirit is messing with them. It gets to the point where and we where I'm going with this is that you and I have talked about how society, the systems that we have in place, they never acknowledge the spiritual side of things. It's always
Hmm.
mental or physical. So like in the movie, the mom brings the kids to the doctor. They're like, how did they get this bruises? So they think the mom's beating them. She's not. Like, and then at one point in the movie, the mom's sitting in like a psych ward getting asked questions when she's like, nothing is mentally wrong with her. It's spiritual
Hmm.
warfare.
Hmm.
And I looked at my wife and I was like, babe, this is exactly what me and Brian talk about. Is that it's based on a true story, so that probably happened to this poor lady who's going through this spiritual warfare, but she's put in a mental institution being evaluated to see if she's nuts. Because as
Yeah,
humans, we've
because
been so conditioned to ignore that side of ourselves.
absolutely right. It's the whole thing going back to Wayne Dyer taught about it, and Joe Dispenza teaches about it. We can heal ourselves like from pretty much anything, right? But we're so conditioned to believe that we have to go to the physical, like especially Western world, Western medicine, all these different things. And then, like you said, people get put in psych wards when actually it's like it has nothing to do with it. It's actually on a deeper spiritual level because everything is on, at the end of the day, everything is spiritual because we're a spiritual being having a human experience, right? But that's the thing is most people don't live like that. So they think everything has to be on this physical plane. When you start looking at everything coming from a spiritual realm, you start to see like, is this thing I'm dealing with, is it spiritual warfare? Is it something coming from an opposing force that's trying to slow down this positive thing in my life or what I'm doing, right? And I firmly believe in that stuff now. Like I see it, and I'm like, yeah, like like these things are divinely put together, and you have these opposing forces trying to mitigate it because they're like, oh shit, this is going to be a strong force here, so we need to do anything we can to try to like detour this, right? But once you become aware of that, you realize, oh, so this is beyond this physical form, you know? It's kind of like the book that Wayne Dyer wrote. There's a spiritual solution to every problem, right? Once you realize there is a spiritual solution to every problem, you're like, oh, so I
Yeah.
can basically heal everything and shift my life if I'm looking at it from a spiritual perspective.
Well, what's interesting about that too is like you know how we talked about the concept of the more you awaken and the more you grow in this aspect of spirituality, energy, God, whatever, the
Hmm.
more the more you awaken, the more like you we talked about this before, is like the more those negative forces are going to try even harder now to stop you, right?
Yeah.
Because or put any little obstacle in there to make you give up. Because that's one of the reasons why spiritual awakening is not comfortable is because the more you start to awaken, the more, if you want to call it the devil, demons, whatever, just negative forces are going to try to come in and intercept you from going on the path you're meant to go on if it's for true good, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's kind of how
Uh,
I look at uh like when I was telling you about my despair, I was like, okay, now that's where I was telling you I have more understanding because I'm like, I'm experiencing it like yesterday and the day before, I was experiencing it in the moment. And then I talked to my wife and then she kind of said the same thing that you had said and that you and I have talked about. It's like, yeah, once you start awakening, those
mhm.
forces are going to do whatever they can. So she's like, just be careful. because they're going to try to mess you up any way that they can.
Oh, 100%. Like they'll literally try to step in and hope that in hopes that you'll try to stop. You can't really stop it, but slow down your awakening and like kind of like again detour you right from it. And that they'll use people, situations, whatever they can. Um, and I experienced that for sure. Whereas like, it almost makes you at times the human aspect of you, like you're going through these hard times as you're growing, you want to quit because you're like, well, shit, if I just stop, I don't got to deal with any of this, right? But
Yeah.
that's not where you're supposed to be. You're supposed to just persist and keep going through it, and understanding you're going to get to the other side, and the other side of it is beauty. So that's what I tell people, like when you're going through these challenges, going through these things, remember that on the other side of this challenge is beauty always. And so like just continue to persist through that challenge, and then you're gonna be like, okay, I'm glad I didn't quit. You know,
You know what I would say is that something that's helped me recently is like you said, when you get on the other side of it, there's beauty.
hmm
Now, what helps me get through it is realizing that it's all beauty anyway,
yeah,
right? Because like Wayne Dyer says, the universe is perfect the way it is.
exactly,
Like
very
there's
true,
nothing you can do to make the universe more perfect. So even if something is negative in your life, it's perfection at work anyway,
exactly.
you know? So
Because you're
that's
always right where you're supposed to be, and you're always experiencing right what you're supposed to be experiencing, right? So when
exactly.
we stop looking at it from a victim standpoint, we start to look at it as like, oh shit, this is actually supposed to be here. You're like, all right, I'm grateful for this, right?
Yeah. And
That's why
it's
when I
crazy
look
because you
back
and
on
I
my
have
past,
talked
I
about
don't
this.
regret it.
Huh?
I said that's why when I look back on my past, I don't regret any of it because it was all supposed to be there.
Yeah. And another thing too is the past doesn't exist anymore.
Exactly.
The only time that it's funny because this is what helped my daughter the other day. And I was like, I told her exactly what you tell me what you say all the time is, well, the future doesn't exist, the past doesn't exist. That's in the past. The only moment that matters is right now.
Present. All we have is the present.
So I would say once you get to that realization, then you'll start to see everything as beautiful because
Absolutely.
you're like, okay, I understand this. This is like you just said, it's meant to be this way for a reason for us to grow. That's how we grow.
And just to touch on that quickly on the presence aspect of things, think about like when you look at your present moment and you look at like, wow, I have everything I need right now, right? So like if you're living in the future, you're worried about like, do I have enough money? Like you were talking about earlier, like, oh, can I pay the rent? Can I do this? Can I do that? So you're living in the future of something that doesn't even exist currently, right? If you live in your past, you're depressed. Oh my gosh, can't believe I made this decision. I could have not bought that thing, could have not made that, been with that person, whatever the case is. But when you look at this present moment and where you are and look around and be like, wow, okay, I'm breathing, I have a home, I have food, like everything is going okay. I'm doing good. Like I'm doing just fine, right? We only suffer because of things that we think we should have, places we think we should be, all these different things that aren't even intended to be in that moment. But when you can learn to just live in a state of the present moment and be grateful for it, you'll end up seeing more and more to be grateful for every single day. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
that's like when I told you my wife did the reading and she's like, you need to connect to your spirit guide. And I was like, huh. So now when I pray or meditate, I thank God, Jesus, and I'm like, thank you, spirit guide. Because at the end of the day, like if an indoctrinated religious person were to hear what I'm saying right now, they'd be like, oh my God, that's evil or whatever. But since I've started like practice gratitude, attitude of gratitude, like you talk about all the time. And if you're grateful for the spiritual side of things, more will come your way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's just that's what I'm saying. Like it's a beautiful connection that you can make if you open yourself up to it.
For sure.
Because then you'll be no matter what happens in your life, and not this isn't from like an ego standpoint, but you'll essentially be unstoppable
Yeah.
and you'll grow into your own power and be able to do and manifest the things that you want in your life. So yeah, man, it's been a lot of awakening the last
That's good.
last few days.
Well, and hey, you know what? I think that what we can just come back to full circle to kind of come into a closing is that we again, what's the biggest thing is doing the work on ourselves, right? And then you begin to awaken to everything you're supposed to and intended to awaken to. So like even for you, you've been doing the work. Now you're being given more and more signs and synchronicities to continue you forward, right?
Exactly.
So I mean, my encouragement to everyone is start doing the work. Start a meditation practice. Do a better job of taking care of your body. Be more mindful. Slow down, be present, be aware. And you'll start to see the truth in life and you'll start to see beyond that veil and you'll start to see what's actually going on and what we're actually here for.
I couldn't
Right?
have said it better myself, man. That's exactly what we need to do.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's just been a wild ride so far. And that's another thing too, is just because you get to a certain spot, like spiritual stuff, like spiritual awakening, spiritual growth, like when I said I'm like we're all students. So like this is not just a, oh, I'm going to do this for 6 months and be done. This is a lifelong thing.
Absolutely.
And the more you, like exactly what you just said, the more you do those, take those steps throughout your life, you'll evolve spiritually.
Absolutely.
Just like when you're going to college, except this is a lifelong. So
Exactly. This is not a 4-year degree. This is a lifelong journey. So
yeah, this is your life degree.
yeah, yeah, which is much more important than any other degree you can get. So yes,
So,
sir.
well, everybody, I hope you
Well,
enjoyed this episode. Make sure you hit that like
absolutely.
and subscribe button.
Yeah,
And
share us, put us out there so we can try to reach as many people with these messages as possible.
yeah, share it because if this resonates with you, then there's a reason for it.
And yeah, there's going to be many others that need to hear it. So,
Yes, sir.
all right, buddy, good talk.
All right, everybody. Have a nice day.